more fresh.
Yeah.
Good morning. Hello, everybody, or good afternoon. It's just lunchtime. Welcome to our office hours. I am Kate Howe, the co-founder of Postcards for Parents, and I'm here with Dr. John Stewart.
Yeah, it's good to be here, Kate. I'm proud to be affiliated with Postcards for Parents as your principal clinical support.
Yeah, great to talk to you again today. So today it is somewhere around the beginning of the school year for most kids in the United States, and whether your kids have been back for a week, a couple days, or will be starting next week, it's all this time of transition. So yeah, we wanted to get John's thoughts on what can make the transition to back to school difficult for kids, so that we can empathize with what they're going through, and we can know as parents how best to support, and maybe also some thoughts on ongoing kind of interactions throughout the school year with the school, with the teachers, and our kids, obviously. So if we just kind of jump right into that, I think we all know back to school happens. It's kind of frantic, and we just drop our kids off, shove them out the door, slam the door, and try and get back to our to-do list. Or maybe we're sad that summer's ending, but we are. It's usually just a rush, and I feel like it's not that kind of thought about or premeditated. So can you kind of describe what's going on that maybe we're not even really consciously thinking about?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think they're different experience for parents versus kids. And in talking to you a little earlier in the week, and then also talking to my daughter, who's got two little ones who are going back to school. Yeah, it is complicated. It's a big transition. There are lots of in terms of for the kids, there's lots of unknowns. For the parents, there's just the relief of oftentimes having a little more structure, a little more time for themselves. There's also there's almost always some sadness about it being a marker of another year of your youngster growing up. It may be a marker that marks the end of summer that says, we didn't get to do this or that we'd hoped for. I think it is clearly one of those moments where you go, all right, we are taking another step down the road. We're leaving something behind and moving into something new. So in terms of for kids, different kids respond to it in different ways, a lot of it depending upon their attitude towards school. But, you get some kids who are excited to get back to see their friends, who've always had school be a place that they thrived in. It was a place that kind of makes them feel good about themselves. And then you've got the kids who are in the middle category who, if they had the choice of being on summer forever, they probably would, but they know it's a necessary evil, and they go back and they enjoy seeing their friends, and make that kind of transition with respect to just the reallocation of their time now to a more structured kind of set of obligations. And then you've got the group of kids who it's really hard to go back. These are sometimes kids who are maybe behaviorally a little more energized. Maybe they don't have ADHD, maybe they do, but these are the kids who the idea of the constraint is hard because they've had a lot of not so good experiences in more constrained settings. I think about those kids as oftentimes having the same spirit, all the same things as any youngster, but those kids, their brakes and steering aren't so great. So they spend a lot of time kind of misperceiving where things are, and they have people kind of frustrated with them in more structured settings, or they have to work really hard at not being impulsive or not, attending to the rules. And so I think for those kids who go back in where it's been hard, maybe kids who are a little slower and starting to learn to read, or reading is difficult for them, or depending on what the year before was like, if they had an experience with a bully or something, there's just so many variables that are kind of operative in the minds of our kids as they go back in, many more than there are for us as adults. Mm-hmm. We as adults are better at organizing them. We're better at kind of naming them and going, oh, there's this concern. This kids, the younger they are, the more so this is true, but even in adolescence, all of those thoughts and concerns, they just get kind of mixed together in a jumble of maybe some excitement, and for some kids, a practice of acceptance, and for other kids, dread. So kids, they've got a lot going on as they make this big transition into a very different kind of set of expectations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and okay, so that is a lot to consider in terms of like what baggage the child is bringing, and I guess. So this is another question that I had, but so kids are reacting to different things, i.e., in their kind of I guess aptitude for school, or their fit with their school. Do different kids react to stress differently? So might you as a parent be kind of noticing different behaviors that you're not necessarily thinking are back to school stress?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that, yeah, absolutely. Let me address that, but let me say one other thing, particularly with the younger kids, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, separation. They spent the whole summer with mom and dad, and now that's another variable is the leaving that behind. And so we'll come back and talk about that a little more. But okay. I think that when you ask about different ways that kids would demonstrate or show stress, I think that it is, as you said, it's different for different kids. I mean, you've got some kids who are just going to get quiet. They're going to kind of go within themselves. They may be hanging around the house a little more, reading a little more, just doing those kind of solitary things while they just work at getting ready to move forward the challenge. And you've got some kids who are going to, just activate. They're going to get energized, and they're going to try to stay incredibly engaged in anything but thinking about the challenge that lies ahead. So those kids are going to be out there just wanting to do a lot. Then you're going to have kids who are more overtly anxious about it. You're going to have kids you might have a youngster who, before they go to bed, before they go to sleep, you go in to tuck them in, and you discover that they're crying and they're saying, I don't want to go to school. And that, some kids are going to be able to show that. Others are just going to wear it in one way. I don't think it's any different from reading anxiety in your kids at any other time, but this is a time where you want to be cognizant of it, and then how you respond to it. You don't want to over respond, but you don't want to under respond. It's finding that balance of just saying, hey, yeah, I know it is, it is a big deal. It's a change, isn't it? Express a little belief in them, but let yourself, as you'll always hear us say here at Postcards for Parents, let yourself first feel whatever your kids do before you move into giving them ideas about how to feel better about it.
Right. So again, one kind of big step in the process is just realizing how big of a transition this is, how big their feelings might be, kind of checking with what you know about your child in terms of those things you said at the beginning, how does school feel for them? And that will all help you get into that place of attunement. Yeah.
Attunement is always most difficult when your child is temperamentally, or at least situationally, very different from you. If you're somebody who loves school and you got a kid that's just, oh my God, it is prison. It's going to take a little more work on your part to be there, to be present, and just feel with them what it's like for them. So,
how much do you think an experience like that, that school would feel like a prison for a child, or that they really just don't want to go or don't want to be there? How much do you think of that is their kind of temperament, and how much is experiences that they have had, or that might be able to be changed at a different school or with a different teacher, that kind of thing?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that and temperament changes It does. It's not fixed, whether we think about it from, genetic standpoints and epigenetics and expression of different aspects of the genes, or we just think about it as a child kind of evolving in some sort of organic way. But I think that temperament's a factor. We have kids who are drawn more towards challenge. They challenge. You've got kids who are more avoidant of it. You've got kids who are a little more social than others, and kids who are a little more private, a little more to themselves. So I think that those are variables, but I also think that the fit with the school, there is no variable more important than the relationship your child has with their teacher or teachers. There's nothing that makes a child more ready to learn, better able to learn, or happier to go to school than having a teacher with whom they resonate. And different kids are going to resonate with different types of teachers. However, I would say the vast majority of kids are going to resonate with teachers who make them feel like they like them, who have the ability to make that youngster feel like, they're glad they're there. And have a little bit of affect that they can share with that. So I do think that engagement. I also think that there are some teachers who just, from a teaching standpoint, are much better at engaging kids into learning activities. They're just more creative. They bring their own energy to it, their own excitement about it. So I think that there are a lot of variables that determine how it goes.
Okay, so I wanted to go back to something that you said earlier about that we're all dealing with separation from having spent a lot more time together in many cases over the summer, to what's a much more structured school day. Sometimes it involves aftercare, et cetera. How can we kind of mitigate that separation and maintain our closeness even if we're spending less time together?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different ways that parents do this. I think that do what you can to have the days prior to going to school not be too frenetic. Try to have a little structure started there. Just maybe a little more downtime. It often doesn't happen that way in families because of Labor Day vacation and things like that. But the summer rush to have some fun. But I think that if you can have a couple of days where kids have a chance to just kind of be in their own realm, I think that's helpful. For parents to talk to them, say, how are you feeling about school? And wherever they go, they say, I'm excited about it. Oh, yeah, well, what do you think? What do you think? Have you met your teacher? Do you know who she's, do you know who's in your classroom? Or kids who are sad, just being with them a little bit and saying, yeah, it's hard to go someplace new and it's hard to leave home sometimes. I know you miss your dog when you're gone all day or whatever. You keep it as light but still real. You're not wanting to over respond to their anxiety like this is, oh my goodness, this is awful. Anxiety is a normal aspect of life. And so as parents, we want to find that mid ground that feels it, acknowledges it, but also doesn't get dysregulated ourselves in response to our kids' dysregulation. So I think that, talking to them a bit about it, I think rituals are always nice.
I was just going to ask you about that. Yeah.
I think that having, going to the store the week before and picking out what their school lunch snacks are going to be. And so you got those all set up and you let them choose which ones, or you set a little note, it says, I love you, or see you after school, whatever you got the wherewithal to do. Sometimes you don't have the wherewithal to do this. You don't always have to be able to do that. But those are kind of nice things. I think coming home rituals are nice. When a parent has the ability to take 5 minutes and sit down with their kids when they come home. Now, their kids may resist that if they feel like they're coming home and they're going to get a lot of questions. Tired kids who are kind of coming out of a fatigued situation, particularly like adjusting to the school year, they don't want a lot of questions. My grandson, I would pick him up some days and I'd say, well, Cruy, how was your day, buddy? And he said, I'm too tired. Ask Willa. Ask his sister how her day was. And I think he made a pretty good case for the fact that that wasn't what he was interested in. However, we went home or we went to someplace and got some ice cream or just sat down for a minute at the you brought a snack to share on the playground. So he's released from school, just sit there for a little while. And that kind of just quieter way of being with kids, when kids can look forward to that, that's cool. And those become rituals.
I think nervous systems do that getting in sync with each other.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Those are the main ones that come to my mind.
I started. I'm kind of bad about like always having more work to do than I have time to put it in. So when my kids get home, I'm often like in my head thinking like, oh my God, I didn't do this, and I want to finish this before we transition to dinner and everything. But I have started, just stopping and going and having a big hug, sitting down, just like thinking about really the nervous system kind of integrating, and it feels good to me, and I think it feels good to them too. So it for some of us, it might have to be more of a conscious effort to do that.
Most of us, Kate, it will have to be a conscious effort. It doesn't have to be long. I mean, 5 or 10 minutes is great. I mean, and you can define this. Say, sweetie, I want to sit down here with you. I got about 10 minutes. So let's just hang out. And you want me to tell you about your day, or you want to tell me about your day, or you just sit and pet the dog together, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It allows you to kind of be present with each other.
So I'm curious about that, kids talking about their day, because I know that, as kids get older, their even ability to remember and sequence and kind of put it into a narrative grows, but in earlier years that is not that great. But so there's an aspect of it that's just not how their brain works. There's an aspect that might be stressful in terms of kind of having to report or having to perform. But parents do want to know about their day. So how do you recommend kind of bridging that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to read your kid. Some days they're going to come home and they've got a story they want to tell you, and you let it flow. Other days they may tell you you're too tired to talk to you right now, and then you let that go. But you circle back to it. I mean, I think bedtime, when you lie down for a few minutes with your kid and look at the ceiling, hopefully that kind of moment is time to say, we didn't get a chance to talk about school today. How was it? Anything interesting happen? Anything awful happen? Sometimes framing it a little bit. What's the best thing that happened at school today? What's the worst thing? And as you present it with some affect. Don't say, what was the best thing that happened at school? Because what happens is memory is most often stored effectively with affect. And when we bring the affect up, it activates, it resonates with theirs, and they're likely to be able to go to it with you. What was the worst thing about today? And usually you'll see them, sometimes they'll say, nothing. It was, that's leave me alone, Dad. But other times you'll find that with a little bit of affect, they'll actually draw them in.
Oh, that's interesting. And when you say affect, you mean emotion, like getting
emotion,
into
a little emotion, a little bit of it snags them. That's a term that Seal uses. He uses a little differently, but to snag their awareness.
Okay, so another question is, what school is much structured often than the summer, but when we talk about our two pillars, connection, so that's the like reconnecting, the maintaining a relationship with them even if you're spending less time. What about in terms of structures to empower them with school? How do you figure out?
This is often a tough one for families, particularly kids who for whom learning isn't making them feel great. School is hard, and so they want to avoid it. They don't want reminders of the fact that, this is how I'm measured. And so those kids are going to be more avoidant of school. Now, kids who school makes them feel great about themselves, well, they're not going to have quite as tough a time carving out time to do their schoolwork and that kind of thing. So I don't think you're asking specifically about schoolwork, but I think it's very difficult to not talk about the topic of what structure at home related to school without talking about schoolwork. Because I think the one thing you don't want to become is you don't want to become a homework police officer. It is not a good thing to do.
Interesting.
So I think that when you got a youngster who's really, really reluctant to doing their work, well, I think first thing you do, if they've got a good teacher, you meet with the teacher and you talk about it with the teacher and see if they have any ideas, if there are any ways in which the teacher is aware of, well, this is critical, this isn't critical, this could be kind of fun that you could do that would help him with some of these basic skills. I mean, you can do things like flashcards with words or math facts that you have as a game. Everyone that they get a penny, and it's just there are different ways to try to make it not quite such drudgery. We also know that kids who have weak attentional abilities, a little weaker executive function skills, particularly with respect to attention, they are much better at attending to a task with an adult or somebody older sitting next to them. And what happens often, the adult may sit down, get them going, and then the adult gets up and the kid stops working. And then the parents say, well, you can do this. You did it when I was here in front of you. But as soon as I get up and I'm not holding you accountable, and that's really not it. There's some pretty good data to suggest that having an adult next to you, if you're a kid who's having a hard time with attention, concentration, having an adult next to you really facilitates your ability to attend. So trying to avoid your parents' consequences or trying to sneak around the issue once they get up and walk away.
So is that about co-regulation in a way that you're just
it's probably about a couple things. One, you may be right that particularly if it's a kid who is avoidant of schoolwork because it doesn't make him feel very good, doesn't make him feel very competent, then just having somebody there may kind of help them regulate emotion. The other thing, though, that I think is probably the more powerful is that one of the limitations that's often seen with kids who have what are called executive function weaknesses, which are a whole cluster of weaknesses that you see typically in kids with ADHD, but there are other kids who don't have ADHD who have some executive function weaknesses. One of the executive functions is something called split attention. And that's your ability to kind of consciously put 90% of my attention right here and 10% of my attention on the clock and my stomach, whether I'm hungry or, that kids who have weakness in the ability for split attention, they tend to be 100% here, 100% there. What happens is that we all kind of have a need to be scanning them, but we need to have some part of ourselves. These kids, they'll get lost in a video game, they'll get lost in a book, they'll get lost in something. And I'm sorry, I just had something pop up. It wasn't supposed to pop up on my screen. They get lost in some activity and they're there, they're gone. Now, these people, these oftentimes become adults who have, it's called hyper attention, who have hyper focus, hyper capacity. And with that, there can be incredible, good things that come out, real productivity. But if you're a child and you're a kid who doesn't do that well, there's some sense that because you're not good at scanning the environment and doing your work, that you keep switching back and forth. My work, the environment, the work, the environment. Watching these kids try to copy something off of a bulletin board is just painful because they look up there, they're there, they come back down, they look here, and now they can't remember what they saw. It's just this, they can't hold it in working memory, which is another component of function, but it's also their attention doesn't split well. So what I think of as being the best hypothesis for what's really going on is when a child has an adult there, it allows them to just kind of focus on this because their survival, their being okay is being covered by the adults split attention, and the
Mhm.
child will just be there and kind of do it, and it just makes them less anxious. Because if you're not, if you think about being somebody who can be so focused, it means you get startled quite often.
Mm.
I'm not hearing the door open and my sister come into the room, or I'm not paying attention to the alarm and that the bell is going to ring. And so if you've had a lot of experiences of being startled, then that actually generates more anxiety, as we were saying before. So I think it's split attention and anxiety that make it so that having an adult there helps them maintain their attention on the task.
So that's interesting. So it's sort of, so that's not what most parents want to do, which is kind of lay down the law, get their kids started, and like not have to be present while their child is doing the homework. What you're really saying is that a parent's presence can really help them do the homework. Is it, I mean,
or
can an adult be doing something else at that time?
Well, for some kids, the parent can be working on their own homework. They can be, it's their presence that really makes a difference. And it's not all kids need this, but I would say more younger children, because they're weaker at attention concentration, split attention, self-regulate. They're just not as practiced at it. Younger kids are going to need it more than older kids. And older kids, maybe only 30% are really going to need that. But that 30% are probably going to need it.
Okay. So then other kind of causes of battles over homework or like not wanting to go to school, just maybe list a couple of the most common things that cause those.
Well, I mean, aside from homework being something that feels like drudgery for a kid who doesn't, the process doesn't make them feel very good about themselves. I mean, there's the other one is that kids, once again, who have some executive function weakness, organizational weakness, they have a hard time figuring out where to start. And so organizing their work can be really helpful. For kids who don't have any, who are more, kind of, right out of the gate, neurotypical, and we may think a lot of kids are neurotypical who aren't, because really bright kids cover this stuff up. He doesn't have any problem with attention and concentration. I watched him watch a Nova show on black holes the other day, and he didn't hear the dinner was ready. He can concentrate. No, there are a lot of it's not easy actually to discern whether or not a youngster, particularly bright kids, because they hide it in different ways, intentionally and unintentionally. But I think that, of your more absolutely neurotypical kids, of which there maybe aren't that many out there, maybe 50%, I don't know. I guess typical, we'd have to say they have to be around 50%. But for those kids, the reasons they don't do it is because there are competing opportunities that are more rewarding. Talking to your friends on the phone, seeing what's happening, phones with older kids and homework. I mean, it's not easy for parents, and because they oftentimes may have to have their phones or computers or iPads. They have to have their computer there to do their homework, but then they've got music playing in the background, and then they're getting text by their friends. Fortunately, most of them are better at multitasking than we older folks are in that regard. But I think competition. I also think that it can just become a power struggle between parents and kids. And more often than not, when parents are really struggling with an older kid about homework, your best bet is to step away from it, because you don't want the relationship to just get torn up while you're trying to make them do something you cannot make them do. You can't make them do their homework. But you talk to their teachers and you say, look, we're trying to avoid battles here. It's really hard for Joey to do homework at night. And when we push him on it, he just gets really upset. Ask the school to help out. They may have homework clubs that kids can get assigned to. They may have a teacher who knows it's hard for the kid and says, all right, if you do this half and you do it tonight, you won't have to do the other. Bring the school into this. And it's not unusual for me in working with families with kids who are struggling with the issue of homework to say, more than anything, stay out of it. Most kids don't want to fail, but if they can get distracted into a power struggle with their parents and they can go kind of kamikaze on you. They
Mhm.
don't care that they're going to fail. They're not going to lose this power struggle with you. And so you gotta be a little careful.
Huh. That seems stressful for many parents to.
Yeah, when I first tell them that, they look at me like, yeah, right, that's not happening.
Interesting. All right. Well, maybe a topic for another day.
Yeah.
Yes, more about kind of homework habits and helping to facilitate those. Let's see. I guess I have two more questions, kind of about balance. So, and this is also in terms of structure, but how families are busy. Like there's kind of more than we can do in all of these areas. How do you recommend kind of balancing social, academics, and extracurricular stuff?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because that was one of the things that I was about to say and didn't earlier. Don't overschedule your kid. Now, some kids really want and thrive in that stuff, but even those, you got to be a little careful about that. Kids need downtime, and they also need the social experience of, they need the experience of themselves. How do I manage downtime? They need the social experience of how do you make connections? And, I think one of the things that you'll hear sociologists talk about is that all the structure that in our culture right now for kids really undermines the development of social skills that were associated with being in a neighborhood and picking up, people to play a baseball game or a kickball game or, capture the flag. And that kids oftentimes don't have that many opportunities to figure out how to manage an unstructured social dynamic. So I think you want your kids to have those opportunities. You also don't want your kid exhausted. It is possible to have too many rich experiences, because you need time to kind of integrate, kind of process, and that involves some degree of downtime.
Yeah, I feel like I've noticed that it can feel as a parent like there's pressure to kind of be doing good stuff all the time, or to be like sucking the marrow out of everything. But days when I feel like it's going to be really boring for my kids, they actually don't seem to mind that much. I mean, by the afternoon they might start kind of fighting with each other, but it's not that bad, really.
Yeah, it's good practice, and it allows them to practice being as opposed to doing.
Yeah, well, probably a lot of us parents could do more of that too.
You could use it. Yes.
Okay, last question. You've talked about this a little bit, but I know that you have worked extensively kind of in conjunction with schools, and so you have probably think of them as partners maybe more than many parents do, and this really varies by the parent and by the school, but what do you think is the kind of optimal relationship? Because you hear about, I think some parents just feel disconnected and like, I just send them there and they're in charge and I don't really know what's going on. It's a black box. And others are like overly managing the school, which isn't good either. So what's a good relationship?
You shoot right between those two, I think. I think, but it's important that your kid's teacher and your kid knows that their teacher. I mean, it's great that you trust in the institution of education, but things about your kid, and your teacher's going to know things about your kid. They're going to be perceptions and misperceptions, and that you want to be able to either learn from or correct. Or so I think that you want a relationship with your kid's teacher. That doesn't mean that you hang out together once a week, but you want to be able to call and be real with them. Just kind of talk to them. Right, this is what I'm thinking. What are you thinking? What are you seeing? So put forth a sense of yourself as a real kind of a collaborator in this. Many teachers are scared of parents. More teachers are not, and many parents are scared of teachers. And depending on what your experience in school was like, you're going to go in there with some expectations. What your experience of teachers was like, you're going to go in there with some expectations. And So you just kind of have to, make your way through that. But I do think it's important that as you pass your kid off to somebody who is as big a part of their life as is a teacher, that teacher, you know them in some way. And it's not, I know this is going to sound a little Machiavellian, but it does not help for some of those teachers, because teachers are on a continuum. You've got really good ones and some that aren't. You've got some who dearly love children and some who I don't think like children. They're humans, just like all the rest of us. And that even though it may sound a little Machiavellian, I don't think it's ever bad for a teacher to see that there's somebody lovingly watching their child in their journey through that teacher's classroom. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's ever a bad thing. Now, sometimes teachers are going to, think of you as coddling or over-involved or helicoptering, and they may be right about that sometimes. If a teacher gives you some honest but respectful feedback, well, then you want to consider it. You don't want to necessarily accept it, but they're people just like you. Most teachers come to teaching and bring the same strategies that they had visited upon them as children from their parents. That is the starting point in being a teacher. Now, I'm not saying all of them. I'm not saying you could have a teacher who had a horrible childhood and worked through a lot of it and is a wonderful teacher. But just don't ever think that those teachers have a phenomenal amount of training in social emotional management of children, because they just don't.
Oh. But that does lead me to remember something that you've said, which is that kids and people learn in the context of a relationship that they feel good in, right? So, and as you said earlier, kids will just naturally kind of like school better, perform better if they feel like their teacher likes them, right? So, yeah. I mean, I'm just curious about ways that a parent might facilitate that relationship. My kids came home yesterday with sheets from their teachers kind of asking for insights. And I mean, do you feel like humanizing your child a little bit to the teacher will work?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Sending a picture of a particular sweet picture that you have of him, or just, I mean, I think the teachers want to know your kids well because they know that they do their best job when they know them. So, and kids want to know their teachers well. I mean, I think it's okay for you to help them try to map out, Miss Smith, she's really funny and she's fun. Oh, but she can get kind of grouchy sometimes, can't she? Yeah. So you learn from other parents, you learn from other kids. So you're helping them create a coherent narrative about who this person is, who's their caretaker. Mm-hmm. Kids have attachment relationships with their teachers, and they're either secure and good, or they're insecure and problematic, or really problematic and disorganized. And that's, so I think as a parent, you want to be respectful of the profession, but this is somebody that you know more about and have more invested than anybody on the planet. Mm-hmm. So you also want to, you want to be present. Yeah.
I think that's a great idea about kind of talking, like what you just said, helping your child kind of map out a little bit of an independent idea of their teacher, because as with adults, as with institutions, we kind of think like, oh, they're right, or they're just fixed, and how they're being is reflective on us instead of it's them. And even if I just external a little bit, then I won't feel bad about it if it's not going well.
Yeah, absolutely. So
we should make a little worksheet about that.
Stuff to talk about, Kate. Yeah. These little creatures, they're fascinating. And the fact is, we are just about as fascinating as they are.
Hopefully.
We're complicated. We're all kind of complicated.
Cool. Well, any other last words of advice or things that we didn't touch on in terms of getting our kids started off in the right way?
Well, moms and dads, congratulations on getting your kids through another summer, getting a little bit of your life back, and have fun with your kids. That's just do everything you can. And when you get to a place where it's very difficult to have fun with them, when they're coming home from school or any other circumstance, well, then, that's a time to drop back, maybe slow down a little bit. And always your go-to when you're struggling is be present. Figure out additional. And doesn't mean be invasive or intrusive. It doesn't mean asking a bunch of questions. It means being present.
Okay. I did remember one more question. Do you have five more minutes?
I've got about 3 minutes.
Okay. What about goals? Like in terms of saying like, oh, talking to your kid about academic goals?
I mean, I'm not big on them because I don't think they usually hold much water. I think they're more about the adults' goals. Most kids go into the school year, particularly kids who've had a harder time, or kids who do really well. They may go in and go, I'm going to do better this time, or who does really well in school, I'm going to get all straight A's this year. I guess there's a place for goals. I don't want to say that there's no room for aspiration, but I'm not big on that, on the kind of cognitive structure of goals as having a whole lot of power in them.
Mm-hmm. But maybe more in the terms of, well, what are you interested in learning this year? Or like what books would you like to read? Kind of that kind of thing?
I think you can ask all those kinds of questions. I do. But kids in particular, younger ones, I mean, they live so much in the moment, and I think it's fine to ask that question. That's being curious. Being curious is always a good thing, or almost always a good thing. But I think then transforming that into some objective, something that we want to achieve. I'm not. Somebody else might make a case for that as being really, really helpful, but it's just not something that I have ever been particularly drawn to.
So is your sense and experience more that if you keep the relationship strong, them feeling safe and helpful structures, that they will navigate their way to the learning goals that are important?
They'll thrive. They will be drawn towards the learning that they're most compelled to, and they'll slog their way through the stuff that they don't like, and I think that's how it happens. That's how I think growth is. Kids have an innate drive for competency. There's a guy named Robert White wrote about that years ago. And they have an innate drive for competency, and we have to just kind of create around. They're kind of like a plant. We'll put the dirt there, and we'll put the water on it, and we'll maybe even fertilize it a little bit. But
talk to it every day.
Talk to it every day. but it's going to do that. That's what it does. Mm-hmm. It grows. Mm-hmm. And where I think about goals and things like that, I think that they are oftentimes imported by adults, and they're not really felt. And maybe they are in some circumstances, but they also take away, they create this opportunity to kind of judge, where am I with respect to that? And I don't think that's typically all that helpful for most of us.
Interesting. Another topic for another day.
All right.
Sounds good. Great to talk to you.
Good to talk to you, Kate. And now we'll be in touch, and I'll see you next week.
Sounds good. Thanks, John. Have a good week. Bye.
Bye-bye.